foolishness. Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I know you can hear it in my voice, the frustration and the anger already at the start of the show. Let me show you what was happening as the show was starting. So if this is happening, they're probably disconnecting the links for Alex. They're probably breaking this stuff. And this is I'm going to use this video, and I'm going to submit this along with the other stuff I've submitted to the FCC. This is absolutely outrageous. So I'm going to show you something, everybody. This is what we have to go through every flipping show. We have triple and quadruple checked the links. As soon as we went live, everything was cool. I think about 45 seconds to a minute before we went live, this is what comes up. I'm going to see if I can pull it up there for you to. So check this out. I'm in the room I told you that we're redoing or whatever. I'm going to try to pull this back. Hold on, everybody. You might not be able to see this. Let me see if I can get it. Let's see. Let's see. Here we are. So look. Let's see. Pull it back a little bit. Anybody that has you see that? Look closely to that. If you have a chance to enhance that, I'm gonna tell you what that is. First, it was Rumble, then it was Locals. And I know that Rumble did not disconnect the link. I know that Locals did not disconnect the link. As we're streaming right now. My son is in the background, and he is on another computer, and he's trying to see what's going on. This is and today I don't even believe it's fully YouTube. I think this is StreamYard trying to sabotage the show. Again, we have guests that are supposed to be here, a guest that is supposed to be here. So we know that if they're not here, just what happened to the links with Rumble and Locals could happen to them. If you all give me a chance, I'm going to play a little clip. And while the clip is playing, I'm going to try to connect with Alex, okay? Because this is crazy here. This will make you, and this is what they're trying to do, but they can't do it to me. They're trying to make me shut the show down or just leave this alone. And this is absolutely crazy. I want to apologize to each and every one of you. And I want to ask each and every one of you, does this happen to the major shows? Does this happen to even shows that are slightly bigger than me or smaller? No. But it happens to me on a daily basis. And the question is why? Why? I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. I'm a straight shooter. I am absolutely pissed right now. You can see it in my eyes. You can hear it in my voice. And these games that they're playing, they need to stop. Because even if you're after me, don't disrespect the people that are watching. Don't disrespect the people who would watch. Don't disrespect the people who are viewing this, because you get your advertising dollars from them. If you don't like me, that's one thing, but don't disrespect the audience. Okay? It's insane, and I am absolutely outraged right now. What's going on? So hold on, everybody. I'm going to play a clip real quick. I'm just going to pull up a clip, and I'm going to play it. I'm trying to find one that's a few minutes long so that I can hit up Alex real quick. See if the links are working or whatever. So give me 1 second while I tell you. StreamYard, you and YouTube, you guys are you winning a little small battle right now, but this is a war. And I'm going to bring hell to you, okay? But so let me pull up a clip. It can be any clip. Let me just since we're on economics, let me pull up an economic clip, okay? Here we go. And I'll be right back.
And joining us next to discuss the current state of the U.S. economy, we have Peter Schiff, Chief Economist and Global Strategist at Euro Pacific Capital. Peter Schiff, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Peter, when it comes to Bidenomics, the Biden administration touting low unemployment and heavy investment in infrastructure, among other things. However, when you talk to many average Americans, they're still feeling the impact from inflation. Help us understand the diversion or the disconnect.
Well, remember, it's government spending. It's not really investment that's going on. And all that government spending is being financed by deficits. And that's really the source of the inflation. And it has been the source of the inflation for many, many years because the Fed has been monetizing all the government debts by creating money. And that's what's been putting all this upward pressure on prices. So it's the government that is responsible for the inflation. And as long as the Biden administration keeps on spending money that it doesn't have, inflation is going to get worse.
Peter, it appears as though the Vice President, Kamala Harris, is aware of the pressure the average American is facing. Let's take a quick listen.
For a plane, train, bus, gas, most Americans are a $400 unexpected expense away from bankruptcy.
What do you make of the Vice President's comment?
Well, that's true. In fact, everybody is bankrupt. The U.S. government is also bankrupt. We just don't want to acknowledge it. But we admitted that during the fight over raising the debt ceiling. We said that if we can't raise the debt ceiling, we have to default on what we've already borrowed, which means we're broke. We don't have the resources to pay our bills. All we can go is deeper into debt so that we don't have to pay our bills. So the whole country is broke thanks to all this reckless borrowing and spending that has been made possible by a cooperative and complicit Fed that has kept interest rates artificially low and monetized all that debt. But now that the Fed is forced to allow interest rates to rise, the air is coming out of this bubble, and it's going to be felt, throughout the U.S. economy.
Peter, I want to get your thoughts on China. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo wrapping up her trip from the communist nation, coming out saying, quote, decoupling is neither in our economic or national security goals. What do you make of this approach?
Well, we can't afford to decouple because you have to recognize that China is both our biggest supplier and our biggest banker. The Chinese loan us the money to buy the stuff that they produce that we can't. And our entire standard of living rests on the support of China. And if we lose that support, it's going to collapse. Now, we're in the process of losing that, whether we want to or not. I think the Chinese realize it's in their interest to drive the decoupling. And that's what's going on. Look at what's happening with the BRIC nations. They had a summit. They're expanding their numbers. They're looking to de-dollarize and to reduce and eventually eliminate their dependency on the U.S. dollar. And when they no longer need dollars, well, then they no longer need to sell us their stuff because they have plenty of domestic demand for what they produce. And that means the United States is going to be in a lot of trouble because we don't have the industrial capacity to produce what we're now getting from China. And despite what Biden is saying about some kind of manufacturing renaissance, it's all a bunch of BS. The manufacturing sector continues to shrink under his presidency, and our trade deficits have hit record highs.
So, Peter, how do we manage or mitigate the dangers that a more tethered economic relationship with China poses to us?
Well, what we have to do is reduce the burden that the U.S. government places on the American economy and on American industry. So we need to see massive deregulation. We also have to see substantial and across-the-board cuts in government spending so we can relieve the economy of the burden of paying for that spending so that we can start producing again the things that we are now importing from China and other countries, because when the dollar collapses, which I think is inevitable as it loses its status as a reserve currency, we're not going to be able to produce unless we're not going to be able to consume unless we can produce. And right now, our productive capacity is being inhibited by government.
Peter Schiff, really appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure.
So I've contacted Alex. Let me tell you, these links are being broken. We'll wait and see if the new link that's sent to him, that he can access it. The links are being broken. I'm not a tech guy, so I couldn't tell you how they're being broken. All I know is that prior to the intro coming, as the long intro came on, prior to, if you go to the beginning of the show, we had the we're going live soon thing. When that came on, right? That's when the Rumble and the locals links were broken. And immediately I took pictures so that I would have evidence. So we'll wait to see if he can access the links. If not, StreamYard and YouTube, you suck. But let's go to one short clip, okay? And then we're going to discuss this, and hopefully we'll discuss it, and somehow he can join us on the show. This is absolutely. I have little to no words for what is going on with them and them trying to sabotage my show. But I want to, before I go to the clip, I want to thank all of the viewers, all of the I would say the Red Pill family that participate, that joins us in the chat, that just looks on. Because without you and without God, we wouldn't be able to do this. But you see live what I have to go through just to get a show on deck. And a lot of you stay with it regardless. And you understand, and a lot of you leave comments in the comment section alerting me to things that I wasn't even aware of. And I want to say I appreciate each and every one of you all. So I want to play this little small clip that goes hand in hand with what I just played with Peter Schiff, okay? I just want you to listen closely. It's just 52 seconds.
Congressman, check this out.
If we're going to keep printing money, why do we have taxes at all? I've asked that question in the Budget Committee. Nobody can answer it. Like, if we're literally not going to actually adhere to a budget, balance the budget, constrain spending, and do the responsible thing, which we never do, why on earth would we not just get rid of taxes? Right? If you're going to spend almost twice as much as you take in, which we're getting dangerously close to, if you take in $4 trillion and you're spending $3 trillion more than that, I don't know what the numbers are, but why not just print the $7 trillion? I mean, it's a genuine question. Oh, Chip, that would be irresponsible. Why? I mean, we all know why, because we're living a fiction.
So he said, because we're living a fiction. Now, what does this have to do with the title? Remember, this is decline, Imperial decline, and Western collapse. And in the Peter Schiff, now see how God works? I'm playing these clips to try to contact Alex to make sure that the links are not broken. While I'm contacting Alex, I'm listening to the clips, and I'm like, man, this goes hand in hand with the show that we're talking about. So on the first clip, when Peter was talking about how America is living above its means and how nations are fleeing the dollar and how America is no longer producing anything and how the debt burden will force America, will force her to live within her means. And in so many words, he was talking about the paradigm change that is underway. This paradigm change is what they call a once in a lifetime change. Why? Because never in the annals of history in the last 4,000 to 6,000 years has a nation been so powerful, so influential, so rich, right? And so at one time beloved and revered that is now losing everything. Its wealth, its admiration, its political influence, its military power, its friends, everything that America dominated and everything that drew people to America is now forcing people away from America, forcing people away from the West. We're seeing this in real time. It's showing us the level and the depths of imperial decline. And remember, when we're watching imperial decline, let us not forget that America is what we call the weight-bearing load or the weight-bearing wall or pillar of Western domination, Western influence, and Western wealth. That's why when there's a major problem underway, America, she's always involved. Look what happened in Libya. As France was trying to be the quote-unquote front man, what happened? America was directing everything in the background. She's that weight-bearing pillar. And what we see, as I often say, we see fissures, cracks, all in this weight-bearing pillar of Western society and Western influence and Western power. And each day that we wake up, there is yet another fissure, and another fissure. Now, these cracks are immaterial one by themselves, but as more fissures pop up, and you see the cracks or the fissures starting to connect, it puts the weight-bearing pillar in jeopardy. And if that is in jeopardy, guess what happens? The house that it supports is also in jeopardy. And the house that it supports is Western influence, Western domination, Western exceptionalism. So when we see America in this precarious situation, we must not lose sight of the fact that as America goes, so too goes the Western world. And that is why they are fighting like hell in Ukraine. That is why, even against everybody's best judgment, and everybody said, hey, stop supplying weapons, stop funding this. Don't you see your sanctions are not helping you? They're hurting you more than they're hurting Russia. And yet, you're saying that these people must be lunatics for them to continue doing this. Well, guess what? They are lunatics, and guess what? They have planned this out, and they have put every scenario up, and they understand that even though what they're doing is lunatic and suicidal and insane, this is the best plan that they have out of all the rest of the plans to try to maintain their power and influence and wealth. Because when the dollar dies, so too dies the pound, so too dies the euro, so too dies that experiment called the European Union. And now with the buildup of debt and Europe and America no longer being able to have a free ride, and America no longer being able to export inflation, all of these black swans, all of these things that you put on other people comes back within your borders now. And guess what? Instead of you worried about a war abroad, you're then worrying about a war at home, because the very people that you promised everything to, you no longer can give anything to. And with the people now falling on hard times, every day the times are getting harder for them. And all of the promises are being exposed. You're looking at civil insurrection and strife. That's why they're so mad now about anybody showing an alternative narrative. Speaking of alternative voice, showing an alternative way of looking at things. Hence, they're attacking my show. All right. But I want to say this. Hold on. Let me see something. I just got a beep. Hold on 1 second. Let me make sure this is not Alex. Hold on, everybody. Please give me a second. Live. So if he does not get through, we'll do the show again. And I think he's free all week or something like that. All this upcoming week. Not free, but for the show or whatever. Okay. So hopefully this link that we give him will work. Man, listen to me. When I started the show, I was angry because of the shenanigans that were being pulled on me. And it's deliberate. It's deliberate. But the more the show progresses and the more the show goes on today, the more the anger dissipates. And I understand that they see me as a threat. And they should not see me as a threat. What they should see me as a threat is the truth, the underlying truth because I'm not going to embellish anything. And I want everybody to understand something. If I have to lie or embellish something to you, I won't talk about it. I'm not going to do that just for viewership and just for subscribers. I'm not with that. I would rather just stop the show. You understand? I would rather just stop the show. So, and if you hear the background, remember my daughter, my son, and they're could you close that? They're doing some renovations in this room that I'm in. I'm actually in. Okay. But anyway, let me go back to something real quick. Where is it at? All right. So we talk about the economic decline and collapse. And I want, where is it at on the show? I want to play something that I played before too, and it involves the economy. I want you to listen to this very closely, all right, about the U.S. debt. It's only 3 minutes. So pay close attention to this. And when we come back on the other side of the break, we're going to analyze it. We're going to break it down, and we're going to go into an article that shows you the dire economic situation of America, which means that we'll be looking at the dire economic situation of the West. And then we'll start getting a clearer picture of why America is provoking Russia, provoking Iran, provoking Burkina Faso, Niger, and all of these other nations, China, and all. We'll start getting a clearer picture on this. Remember that you're watching the most powerful platform for truth anywhere on social media and on God's green earth. This is your platform for empowerment, economic empowerment, physical and spiritual edification. This is your platform for that. So continue to support the channel. Hit the like button, subscribe, and let's continue this movement. And let's hit them in the craw. Let's kick them in the groin by you subscribing and sharing this thing, because this is the truth. And you're going to get nothing but the truth. Now let's play this clip.
The U.S. is walking the same path to collapse, and that many of the fallen empires once strode through. And that's the damning assessment of Washington's current financial state of play by a prominent British scholar and economist.
Any great power that spends more on debt service, interest payments on the national debt, than on defense will not stay great for very long. True of Habsburg Spain, true of Ancien Regime France, true of the Ottoman Empire, true of the British Empire. This law is about to be put to the test by the U.S. beginning this very year. The U.S. fiscal policy is on a completely unsustainable path.
All right, that was by Neil Ferguson there. Let's take a look at the numbers here. I'm going to break them down for you to see. The U.S. Congressional Budget Office itself predicts a bad ending for the American economic policy. As you can see on the screen right now, this year, net interest spending is set to surpass military expenditure by almost $50 billion. Long-term predictions are no more positive for Washington. By 2034, the figures right there, analysts forecast a 1.5% gap, which is itself $500 billion from the difference you can see right here. Now, that's not all. The International Monetary Fund has almost published dire economic predictions. Now, the country's fiscal deficit is predicted to exceed about 7% next year, and that's the figure right here. Now, while that may sound small, it equates to about $1 trillion. The International Monetary Fund says that poses significant risk for the global economy. The second figure that you can see here shows the U.S. debt has surpassed 35%, and that's more than $10 trillion, which in other terms is 6 times the size of the UK's entire GDP. And in the long-term predictions that we can see here is also making grim readings. Since in 3 decades, the gap is expected to reach about 66% or almost $20 trillion. Now, geopolitical expert Eddie Smith believes that the so-called American empire is on a rapid decline.
The weapons industry and the weapons lobby is making tons of money from Ukraine. So it's in their interest for the government to basically give them another stipend of money by purchasing more weapons for Ukraine. And it's in the interest of the neocons and the neoliberals in the U.S. State Department who have been behind this Ukraine policy from the beginning. It's been something that the Democrats and folks like Victoria Nuland have been pushing for a long time. People have been predicting the collapse of the West and the Western Empire for a long time. And I mean, it is inevitable throughout history. Empires rise and fall, and the U.S. is no different. And you see the signs of an empire in decay. 80% of our people living paycheck to paycheck while the entire country is drowning in debt. The richest people in society are the big banks and the multinational corporations that all of the working people owe their debt to. And the government doesn't seem interested in doing anything about it. They only seem interested in pumping more money into the military-industrial complex and more foreign wars.
So now you're starting to see how the economics is tied to the politics and the geopolitics. So in real time, America is only doing what other empires did before her. See, sometimes when a person is hit with shock, they're frantic, right? And so, especially when they're fearful, you've had a person that's confident all their lives, and then something scares them and they become fearful, and they start looking at, hey, I lived this life for so long, and everybody is used to me living this life. I got to maintain this this way of life. I've got, or either I've got to maintain the perception that I'm living this life. And so people do all types of crazy stuff. If you look at what is the ID, the channel ID, investigative discovery, right? You'll see a lot of robberies, a lot of murders, mistaken murders, people that really didn't try to murder somebody, but in their mind, they rationalize this plan that, hey, I'm not going to hurt anybody, but I'm going to do this, this, and this, and I'm going to bluff, and I'm going to, threaten and all of this other stuff to get a point across so that I can come into this money. And then the plans go south, somebody is murdered, then they go and cover up all of this stuff. This is what America is doing. This is what Great Britain is doing. This is what the Western world is doing. They have been so accustomed to everybody else looking at them as the beacon of light, liberty, freedom, and a home of wealth, right? Because this is the propaganda that they live. They give you this propaganda that in the West, you live this way, right? Until you get to the West and you start going down the interstates and you're seeing up under the interstates, as far as the eye can see, homelessness. Or when you go up the street and you see people standing on the corner. Oh, there's Alex. Alex is in the booth. All right, we got Alex in the booth. Yes, yes, yes. Let me bring him on, okay? I told you guys, and this is my guy here. Alex, how's it going today?
It's going really well, thank you. And you?
Oh, man, I'm doing good. I want to say, man, I really appreciate you joining me, Alex. I've been having a lot of problems with my show lately, with YouTube, and it's like they're trying to suppress my numbers and suppress my show. And I'm not lying about anything. All I'm doing is talking about the reality of the decline of the Western world economically, the irrational policies that they initiate geopolitically, and you are in a better position to talk about the situation that I was just talking about with the Western world and how the entire system is collapsing, and it looks like they're pushing for war.
Yes, everything you said is true, but I can see why you're having trouble with YouTube. And so if you want me to help you out, I would start this way. Russia bad, China bad, vaccines are safe and effective, and global warming is going to kill us all unless we pay carbon taxes to the global oligarchy. There, you're welcome.
That is the formula to get 200, 300, 400,000 subscribers. Alex.
Yeah, we want to get your subscribers back.
Yeah, Alex. So, what is the situation? What is the temperature like in Europe as the European Union contemplates another round of ineffective sanctions on Russia, while threatening to openly intervene in the Ukrainian conflict?
The situation is very clearly bad. How bad it is, it's very difficult to judge because, overtly, if you walk down the street, you don't see anything happening. But it's very clear that the people have had it with the pro-war leadership in their countries. I think that the vote we had 10 days ago for European Parliament elections was very clearly along the anti-war, pro-war lines, because all the parties and all the leaders who have been gung-ho about sending troops and weapons and money to Ukraine to prolong the war have been punished in the booth. And all the people who have been reticent, who have been resisting the calls, who have been saying, no, we will not send any troops to Ukraine, we decline to send more aid, military or financial, they have been rewarded. It's not at all been left, right. Like they tell you that extreme right has won in Europe. That's not true at all, because you have right-wing leaders like Emmanuel Macron, who were absolutely eviscerated at the election. And you also have right-wing leader in Italy, Giorgia Meloni, who won hands down and secured a majority of 28%. Relative majority of 28%. It looks like Macron's party is going to retain 2 seats. It was a really a train wreck for them. And so it's very clear that the people in Europe are not interested in the Ukraine war, that they're not interested in helping the Ukrainian regime. People are aware that this is not really a liberal democracy, that they're not sovereign, that they are being remote controlled by the city of London and the Biden administration, the neocons in the Biden administration. That Volodymyr Zelensky is no longer even a legitimate president of that country, that he's an imposter, a wartime dictator, and that everything is pretty much inverted. They tell you that Vladimir Putin is a dictator. He's a very popular, democratically elected leader of Russia, whereas Volodymyr Zelensky, the democratically elected blah blah blah, Winston Churchill of our day, is a clown who has absolutely no legitimacy. And so how does this end? I don't know how it ends, because the movement is kind of like a tsunami hitting the capitals in Europe, but they are pushing back in whatever way they can, even including illegitimate means, even to the point where one of the most popular parties in Germany now, the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, they're looking to outright ban the party. Well, if they ban the most popular party in Germany, the one that has the fastest rise of all other parties, and for good reasons, if they ban it, then they disenfranchise a whole massive sector of like 22% of the German electorate. And they force them to vote for these parties that they rejected. Well, I don't know, but that could push us into civil wars. And I in fact know that in France, several individuals who are close to the military circle actually believe that the unraveling of the situation will include a civil war. And so, you come, if you flew into Europe, you walk down the street in Paris and, in Milan and London, maybe you wouldn't notice anything. But below the surface, bad winds are gathering, and at some point they're gonna break, and we're going to have, who knows, a return of history. Maybe Bastille Day again, maybe revolutionary movements again, 1848 and things like that. So it's tense, but you have to pay attention to notice.
Well, Alex, back to Germany for a second. Excuse me. Do you believe that America has something to do with this? Because we know that American intelligence is all over Europe, especially in Germany. Could it be that the United States is trying to put pressure on the powers in Germany to ban this popular political party because it is not in the interest of empire?
Yeah, except, I would just make it a little bit more precise. It's not America, it's Joe Biden and the neocons in his administration. Because, not so long ago, 4 years ago, you had somebody else in the White House who wanted to pull out U.S. troops from out of Germany. And, the pro-empire factions and neocons just went hysterical. And so obviously he wasn't able to do that. He wasn't even able to pull out troops from Syria and from Afghanistan. But yes, what you say is correct. The neocons in Washington, I never like to leave London off the hook, because London, is hiding behind the U.S. flag. London is actually leading this game. And yes, they are using Germany as their, excuse my language, bitch in the Central Europe. And they want to use Germany opportunistically, if possible, to destabilize Europe further and to use it again to wage war on Russia in some not distant future. But that's a process that takes time. They subjected Ukraine to that process. The process always begins with immiserating the nation. Okay, first you have to create a really, really bad economic situation. You have to rob young men of your nation of their future. They have to, you have to have high youth unemployment. Young people have to fight, particularly young men, have to find no future, and no employment, no career, no ways to reach their aspiration, raise families, and so forth. And then, when the situation is really, really bad, then you have a lot of dry tinder for the militarization and Nazification in that nation. And then at the same time, you ramp up the propaganda. It's all because of Vladimir Putin. It's all because of the Russians, and they're coming for us, and we have to fight back and restore our nation to its greatness, and blah, 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 blah. And then you start to fund these little brown shirt far-right movements. And then you swell their ranks. And then young men start to find a future and a purpose. And then they see like, oh, maybe, in this very bad situation, it is down to me. I'm called on to restore my nation to its proper place, to its greatness. And not only that, but it gives me status. It gets me income. It gets me a nice uniform, camaraderie with other men who are like me. And then you start to brainwash them into becoming, the C-14s and the Azov battalions and all these people who today are combing the streets of Ukraine to scoop whoever they can find and throw them into trenches on the Eastern Front. And at the same time, you start sinking hundreds of billions of dollars into the defense sector, defense, military industrial complex. And so we see this happening in Europe. They thought that they would prevail with Ukraine. Now they realize they lost. And so once they fought to the last Ukrainian, it's going to be the turn of the Poles, the Estonians, the Latvians, Lithuanians, Moldovans, Romanians, Bulgarians, Slovakians, Germans, Finns, you name it. And so this process is now started. And it starts with, slow boiling the frogs. They just introduce some new law where all the young men in Germany will have to register for either military service, or if they don't like the gun so much, maybe some kind of a civil voluntary this or that. But and then the next step is going to be an inch a little bit further and an inch a little bit further. And then you get the same thing that you got in Ukraine. And today we see how that ended. If you rewind the clock 10 years, even if you rewind the clock 2 years, the Ukrainian people, the ordinary people of Ukraine, they were not remotely interested in waging war against Russia. But, they got coerced into one. And I think that the same could happen to us if we, passively acquiesce and just observe this happening and think like, well, gee, the water's getting warmer and warmer. Oh, never mind, turn on the telly and let's watch a show. I'm afraid that the same process is going on in the United States as well, except that we've always been at war with Eurasia, and you guys have always been at war with East Asia. So, the American kids are going to be encouraged to join the army to go kill the Chinese, and we're going to be encouraged to join the army to go kill the Russians. Same difference, same process. It's coming from somewhere, and we have to figure out where it's coming from, and we have to push back because, those rows of Ukrainian flags on top of graves of young men, and there's like pretty much close to 500,000 of those. Well, that could be our kids if we sit and watch the movie play. We have to push back.
Alex, on one of the shows you did with me previously, you were talking about the military industrial complex, and you were talking about why the West is always at war. And I want to refresh your memory. This is on point to everything that you just talked about and everything that is going on. So I'm going to play this. It's a few minutes of you giving everybody a description of what is actually going on. I thought it was one of the most pertinent analysis of the entire situation of why there's always a constant need for war or military bases around the world. So I'm going to bring this up on the screen, and I just want you to listen to this. This is you were on point, man. I mean, you were on point. Here it is. Here.
Hi, and for any ordinary person and ordinary business in the country, and I'm not in the United States, but the same principle applies everywhere. We could all get along really well, trade with one another, because there's stuff I would like to buy from American businesses. And there is stuff that American people would like to buy from, France, Croatia, China, wherever. And in that case, we could simply live in peace and trade with each other. And, if somebody spent too much and produced too little, their currency would get punished, their credit rating would get punished. Exporting countries would be hesitant to, export their goods to them because they would worry about getting paid and so forth. And then that
but I paused there for a second. This is the first time this act like this, Alex. I mean, I've played this clip on the show multiple times. It hasn't buffered, it hasn't paused, and all of a sudden that you're on the show again, and I'm playing your clip, it's buffering and pausing again. This is unreal. But I'm going to take it off and I'm going to finish it up and see if it'll make it through, because you were really chopping up the situation, and you gave a lot of people an insight of American and Western military moves and why it's connected to the economy. I hope everything goes good and it plays better. Here it is.
Belt and improve their production or reduce their imports and basic economic policy. The problem is that what you and I think about these things and the way you and I would deal with these problems is not the same when it comes to the imperial factions, which are basically the very narrow networks of powers that are clustered around the global banking cartel and the mega corporations that have grown up around them. Now, banking and empire usually go together, particularly the kind of banking and the kind of monetary system that we have in place today. And I'll try to explain in as simple terms as I can think of it. Basically, today's monetary system is, we have fiat currencies backed by nothing other than, trust and confidence. And we have fractional reserve banking, okay? All the money that goes into circulation represents debt. If there were no debt in the system, there would be no money in the system, zero, not a single dollar. And so for any money to be in circulation, somebody has to go into debt. Debt becomes assets on the books of the banks. So the banks, your debt is banks' assets. Your liability, right? That's the bank's assets. Now, given that the debt has to be paid back with interest, but only the principal goes into circulation, the whole system functions like a large Ponzi scheme, because the only way that you can pay your debt plus interest is to earn it from other people who have to go into debt for whatever reason, for consumption, for mortgages, for business development, for infrastructure development, whatever. But people have to keep going into debt, and the system is only stable for as long as it grows. So that's why we have this imperative of always growing the economy, the GDP growth. Even when everybody's satisfied, everybody has everything they need, and maybe they only need to make minor purchases, there's always this imperative for the whole system to grow so that people go more into debt and buy more crap so that more crap can be produced. And the government has to keep going deeper and deeper into debt. That's symptomatic. That's across the world, every government, every nation that has this monetary system in place. And that's pretty much all nations in the world today. Now, what happens is that at a certain point, the system is saturated, right? Everybody maxes out on debt. You don't need more stuff. You don't need to go into debt to buy more stuff. And at that point, the system would begin to implode on itself because it's no longer growing. And at that point, what you need is to expand basically by taking other nations' resources as collateral. Because remember also, you can only grow the credit cycle for as long as you can keep adding healthy money, good collateral into the system. And once everybody's maxed out domestically, there's no further collateral that can be added to keep the system going. Or, maybe it's not enough, maybe it's too marginal. And at that point, if the Middle Eastern countries have plenty of oil, well, why not turn that oil into our collateral, and then our corporations can get into debt with our banks against that oil as collateral. Ditto for GMO crops, ditto for gold mines, silver mines, coffee, cocoa plantations everywhere. So this banking system creates an incentive for nations that embrace it to become empires. Now, it's not a given that it has to be military expansionism, because in other nations, for example, I grew up in the communist Yugoslavia, same money system, same thing. The government was spending on big monuments, giving people high salaries, employing everybody. And the effect was the same. The system was unsustainable. But in the West, particularly Great Britain and the United States, the system has tended to go towards military interventionism and the expansion of empire. And this is what the United States has adopted from its predecessor, which is the British Empire, which, once it began to collapse at the turn of last century, at the turn of the 20th century, 100 years ago or so, the British establishment simply decided to transfer its seat of power to Washington and New York to infiltrate and co-opt the democratic system of governance on the United States, and to help themselves to the wealth and military and diplomatic and political power of the United States to continue expanding their empire and to take all other nations' resources as collateral and to use all other nations' populations as a source of cheap labor. And that's where we're at today. So that's why for them, this logic of let's all get along and trade with each other, for them that doesn't work. They want other nations' collateral so that their money system can keep from imploding.
Boom. I thought that was one of the best analysis of what's going on with the system, especially when you talked about how the British co-opted the U.S. government and a lot of the policies that the Americans think are U.S. policies are really British imperial policies, and how under that British mind state that the United States is always driven towards to take other people's resources. Could you give me your thought on your perspective that we just showed?
Well, I would agree. I would agree with myself, and very happy to know that I've grown younger since I made that statement, and maybe even slightly better looking. But yeah, I think that this is our principal problem. The problem of imperialism, colonialism, and an oligarchic system of governance. And basically, this is exactly where it's at. If you go back to May 2021, Davos, Switzerland, George Soros held his annual address to the gathering of these good and great people, and he said that the conflict we are looking at in the world, and the war between Russia and Ukraine didn't start yet, but it was gathering. The conflict that we are observing in the world is the conflict between the two systems of governance. And in that, he was exactly on point. George Soros said it's open societies versus closed societies. And if you listen to other, American officials, NATO officials, British officials, they will say, oh, it's between, Western style liberal democracies and Eastern dictatorships, tyrannies, autocracies, and blah, 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 all of this stuff. But the actual conflict is between the Western oligarchic system and the rest of the world. And by that, I don't mean just the rest of the world, other nations. It's the American people as well, the British people as well, the French people as well, because these people are waging war abroad against other nations that they're colonizing, but also at home against their own populations. And it's been that way since more than 2,000 years, since Greek antiquity, Roman Empire, European colonial powers, Spain, France, Belgium, Portugal, Holland, Britain. It's always been the same thing. And today, that same parasite has infiltrated the United States. And so I think what we need to understand is, because, if you took history 101, 102, whatever, you always study history and it gives you the impression that empires are somehow national things, because it's a thing of a nation that just turns itself into an empire. The Spanish Empire and the British Empire and the French Empire, and today everybody's talking about the American Empire. Empires are not national things. The nations merely play host to this oligarchic parasite that co-opts its structures of governance, its governments, its militaries, its diplomatic corps, its intelligence agencies, its economic power, banking, finance. And then they use this to expand their sphere of influence and to colonize other nations, and also to oppress the people at home. It's very obvious, ever since the British Empire infected the body politic of the United States has become the guardian of the empire with, 1,000 military bases around the world, whatever the number is. Are the American people better off for it? It doesn't look like it. Look at the American cities. Phoenix, Chicago, the Skid Row, San Francisco, Oakland, Philadelphia, you name it. It's all falling down. You could see the same thing in British cities during the heyday of the British Empire in the Victorian era. It's always the same. Venice was the same. Rome was the same. Rome, the things that are left over today are beautiful monuments that were built to last. But the rest was basically Rome was encircled by slums. Most of the people lived in slums in horrible conditions. We don't see that today anymore. The trace of that is erased. And we get this, really nice sanitized version of history. Mm-hmm. But the empire is always mayhem abroad, misery at home. And I think there's no doubt that its origin if you trace the system of incentives that are driving these behaviors, you invariably come to the banking oligarchies, to the money lenders, because they are the only ones in society that have this incentives. They're not visible, so their role is kind of obscure. The visible hand of the empire are maybe the military organizations and the corporations. When BP and Exxon and Shell go to the Middle East and they extract the oil, and when the mining corporations go around Africa and wherever, you see them. You can write stories in the media about the abuse, about the exploitation of labor, about the suppression of labor movements and so on. That's all there. But these corporations could have a very different set of incentives than the banking system, because a corporation, let's take BP, let's say Exxon, to develop an oil field in, I don't know, let's say Nigeria, they need money. So they have to go to maybe JP Morgan, HSBC, to Goldman Sachs, and they need to maybe raise, I don't know, $500 million. And so that becomes a brand new asset on JP Morgan's books, conjured out of thin air, right? Mm-hmm. But earning interest revenues for the shareholders, bondholders, and the executives. ExxonMobil doesn't care where $500 million comes from. If they get the loan from the Chinese bank or from a Russian bank, same difference, right? They don't care. Also, ExxonMobil can just as easily buy the Nigerian oil from a Nigerian company that developed and extracted that oil locally, maybe with a loan from a Nigerian bank. And then Exxon could just, ship that oil over to the United States, to Western Europe, add their margin on top, and have a thriving business still, regardless. The only people who get zilch are the bankers. If a Chinese or a Russian bank or a Nigerian bank finances the development of these fields and the trade. So the banking, the multinational banks, the too big to fails, the GSIBs, global systemically important banks, they are the only ones for whom controlling this collateral by force is the do or die proposition, all or nothing. Either they do control it and they turn it into their own source of wealth, or they have nothing. ExxonMobil could still do business with Nigerian banks, with Russian banks, with Chinese banks, with whatever banks. They don't care. Or buy oil from Nigerian companies that are extracted, or Saudi, or wherever. It doesn't matter. So that's where it's at. It's always the money lending oligarchies that co-opt the politicians, control the militaries, the security systems, the spy networks, the diplomatic corps, and they go after the resource wealth and the collateral. And you see, once you know what to pay attention to, you will see it all the time. We just had Lindsey Graham the other day talking about Ukraine, right? Mm-hmm. He goes like, Ukraine has between 10 and 12 trillion dollars of critical minerals, and we can't give this to Putin. Mr. Graham, it's not yours to give to anybody. But, it just kind of tells you, Lindsey Graham didn't think this up. Lindsey Graham is briefed on what his priorities are by his donors. Mm-hmm. And I bet you, if you look at the list of his donors, you're going to find Citigroup, you're going to find JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, people like that. Or you're going to find organizations that are funded by these very same banks. And this happens all the time. The Chilcot inquiry about the role of Great Britain in the 2003 invasion of Iraq found that 6 months after the invasion, JP Morgan led a consortium of banks that lent $2.5 billion to Iraq to, help their economy. But that loan was secured by Iraqi oil experts. Again, a roundabout way of putting your claws on those oil experts and turning that into a source of, money flows to yourselves from that country. But that could only be possible if the United States military controls Iraq and takes control of Iraqi politics, because, otherwise you wouldn't get that contract. So, the more you pay attention to the news flow, once you know where to look, the more you're going to see it. The Pentagon Papers, I think, who was it? Howard Zinn, who got the papers from Daniel Ellsberg, and then he wrote an article about it, and he said, like, it was all about oil, tin, rubber. It wasn't about freedom and democracy. It's never about freedom and democracy. They don't care about freedom and democracy. It's always about resource wealth. It's about enslaving the local populations to extract that wealth. And, the ultimate beneficiaries of that are our banking elites, parasites, not elites. Now, I wouldn't say just to finish, I wouldn't say, like, let's go lynch all the bankers, because, banking is actually a very useful function in society. Allocating credit for development, for trade, for production, for industry, for all kinds of building hospitals, schools, things. But banking should be structured as a public utility, not as a for-profit business of hidden occult oligarchies that control the political system illegally. That's not supposed to function. It's not supposed to function this way. And so banking is here to stay with us. And it's a very useful thing in society. And I think that credit creation is a part of the social technology that has helped humanity advance. But it has to be democratically controlled. It has to be controlled by the people, and it has to serve the greater good of nations and of communities. And that means that we have to control it. What credit is issued for? Who gets it? Why do they get it? What systems of accountability we're going to be that? Who's going to police it, and so forth? And then we have to use credit for things that make life better for the greatest number of people in an economy, rather than concentrated wealth to a very, very narrow elite that then turns pathogenic, and they start thinking, like, hey, we have all this power. Let's invent vaccines and force everybody to take them, and let's have everybody move around with like a chip in their skin that's going to be read by a 5G network, so we know where everybody is at all times, and we can switch them off if we don't like them, and we can reduce the population or add the population, and then we're going to be gods, and we're gonna fire God.
4 questions before we end the show. One will be on China. One will be on the Russian situation. One will be on Netanyahu. I see you, Jay Blue, Netanyahu. And one is from Chris. I'll put this on the screen from Chris right now. Chris says, I hear a lot that the British took over American power. How did this take place? No one really ever clarifies. I always assumed post-World War II, the U.S. elite saw solidarity with EU elite to maintain capitalism.
So that's a mystery. Okay, we know that at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, the British Imperial oligarchy, and I prefer to call them parasites rather than elites, because elite sounds like they're like better than us, but they're really not. They're like inbred degenerates, and they don't deserve to be called elites. They were very keenly aware that they've depleted the host in Britain, that they are losing their ability to maintain the empire because the cost of maintaining the empire was getting very, very high, and they were going to have to give it up. And so they had these meetings where they discussed what to do and how to dig themselves out of the hole. And basically, they concluded that they need to unite the English-speaking world, particularly the United States. And so, this was the Round Table Group, the Milner's kindergarten. Milner was Alfred Milner, who, if people knew their history, they wouldn't talk about Hitler as being, the epitome of evil, but they would talk about Alfred Milner. And so that was made. That decision was made. That was part of Cecil Rhodes' famous. How do you call it? Jesus, when you die and then you leave the document, who gets what? What do you call that document? I blanked out. The will. The will. Cecil Rhodes' will. That was part of Cecil Rhodes' will. He left his money to fund these clubs. These they were called. I forget. So they started establishing these clubs in the United States where they spread a lot of money to woo the top level of the American decision makers and public opinion leaders and so forth, to kind of scrub away the American relationship with Russia, because there was like a very tight alliance between Russia and the United States throughout most of the 19th century, which lasted until into the 20th century, and to revamp the special relationship between the United States and Britain. That has been effective to the extent that today, when the American people celebrate Independence Day, if you ask people independent from what or from whom, most people kind of give you a blank stare. They're like, well, I don't know, it's a barbecue and fireworks as far as I know, and independence, just like, sounds good, independence, whatever. No, it's independence from Britain, which you no longer have, because this process has been very effective. And most people today don't know that Russia had a tight alliance with the United States, that Russians intervened in U.S. Civil War to prevent the breakup of the Union, and that the enemies of the United States in the Civil War were France and Britain, and Vatican as well, but principally France and Britain. And so this is how the United States was taken over slowly. Then these same groups ambushed the United States with a central bank, with the Federal Reserve Bank, and then it went from there. But I also learned through there's a book called The Great Red Dragon, which was published in 1892 by an American who, if he were alive today, he would probably be having a band defunded podcast. But instead, he was going around the country lecturing, and he documented how British capital was steadily taking over U.S. economy. And so what they would do is they would fund economic development, like the building of railroads, the building of cities, gold mining, oil, steel works, and so on at various times. And they would give everybody credit. And all the money was ultimately coming from London, and London had it because they plundered it from India. So it was basically kind of capital, because back then you had to have gold backing, so it was gold they plundered from India that was brought to London. And then the Bank of England and other banking establishments from England created, they bought up banking institutions in the United States, and they had, even the Bank of England had these secret accounts in US banks on, Eastern establishment. And then they would fund, and then once, everybody was up to their necks in debt, then they would create a crisis, then they would create a bust, and companies started going bankrupt, and then they would start buying up all these, steelworks and oil companies and mining companies and wholesale and retail trade companies, timber companies, agricultural land for pennies on the dollar. And they did this repeatedly, so you had a bust of 1937, and then you had a bust of 1957, and then you had the bust of 1837, 1857, I think 1873, right? There was like three big economic busts that then gave way to major depressions in the US economy. And then these bankers were just like buying up everything and leaving their own oligarchs in power, people like, Carnegie's, the Mellons, the Rockefellers, and so forth. So they took over the economic foundations of the United States, silently and gradually, before they took over the political structures. And so, you can read details about this in this book, The Great Red Dragon. I'm sure that if you put it into a search engine, you can find the PDF somewhere. It's not it's not a particularly well-written book, but nevertheless, it's a valuable testimonial, because, back then there was no internet. The man probably had to rely on newspaper articles but it gives you a glimpse about what was going on the last century. And I have no trouble believing it, because it's very consistent with what we see today as well. We keep having these booms and busts.
Yeah.
Non-stop. We got used to it, like it's a normal thing, like it's inevitable, like that's just how it is, because there's greedy bastards, and there's it's all in us. All the faults are in us. But then you wonder, how come Russia hasn't had any busts since Vladimir Putin took over, and he's been in power nearly 25 years? And how come China never had a bust in the last 40 some years? And then when all of East Asia collapsed in 1997, how come China didn't? Because they didn't. They really didn't. So, these boom busts are not inevitable. They're like wealth transfer projects. It's like a big giant conveyor belt that, first they give credit to the people to develop businesses and develop resources and create all this economic structures everywhere and prosperity and everything. And then they engineer a bust, and then they just scoop it up from people who went bankrupt because, by no fault of their own. Anyway, so that's my long answer to how the United States was taken over by the Brits. And, I think that this still hasn't changed, and I think that the British banking oligarchies still largely control the United States. They work in cahoots with American banking oligarchies, but I think that the mortar is still the City of London, the mothership.
Well, the next question is on. We'll go to Russia. There's three questions left: Russia, Netanyahu, and Israel, which is one question. So that's two, and China. So let's go to the Russian question. What do you think the situation will wind up being soon, seeing that Russia has destroyed a NATO-built, armed, and trained military in Ukraine 3 times and almost on its fourth leg, and NATO continues to provoke Russia? Do you think that Russia will start striking NATO territory with the escalations?
No, I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll find out. I think that the banking oligarchies in the West are in the fight of their life. Their system is imploding. The greatest Christmas gift they could get at this point would be a major war against Russia or against China or against both. And they're doing everything that they can to provoke one. So for them, if the Russians struck Romania, Poland, Germany, somewhere in the West, if they gave the West, the pretext to unite and to say like, well, Putin is the new Hitler, we all have to unite and go to war against Russia, and then escalate it from there, even if they bring it to a nuclear confrontation, that would be a way for them to wipe the slate clean, to print money to no end, to they could justify everything by the war. Like if inflation shoots up to 50%, well, it's the Russians. If your pension's not being paid out, you know who to blame. You know why. We have to share the sacrifices, right? We have to defend our liberties and nations and our democracies. And Russians are bad, and the world's not going to be right until we kill them. And so that would be really the get out of jail free card for them. And I'm pretty certain that both the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians are perfectly aware of this. And so they're not falling for the provocations, and they're not reacting beyond what their strategy and what their plan is. So like these attacks that we saw against their early warning ballistic missile system, the radars, I think that was deliberately calculated to make Russians think that a nuclear attack was coming and that they had to preempt it, or whatever. But they didn't really react, and they didn't respond in kind. Instead, Putin went to North Korea and signed a mutual defense pact with them, which means that North Korea is going to get a lot of Russian weaponry of the kind that can sink aircraft carriers probably, and they can launch missiles into the United States. I think that probably Cuba is going to get Russian S-400s and maybe even some hypersonic missiles. And so they're gonna respond in asymmetric ways, but they're not gonna fall into their provocations. So, I'm cautiously optimistic, but who knows? One miscalculation could turn everything upside down.
Your answer on Russia actually answered my China question, but since I still need to talk on China for just a second, you said something that drew my mind to China when you said that Russia went to North Korea and signed a mutual defense pact. Well, isn't that the same as signing one with China? Because China has a mutual defense pact with North Korea also. So if and China has to come to the aid of North Korea if they're attacked. And now with Russia signing one with North Korea, that brings all three of them into a mutual defense pact. And I thought it was done on a sly, a stealthy way for them to be military allies without saying that Russia and China have signed a defense pact. What do you think on this matter?
Well, I think it makes perfect sense to me, because if Western powers try to start a war in the Pacific against China, China might need military support from Russia, because Russia has certain military technologies that the Chinese don't have. Russia has a lot of combat experience against Western powers, so they have much better insight into how the Western command and control hierarchies operate, how they act, what their weak spots are, how they communicate, and so forth. So that could be very helpful. All that experience could be extremely helpful to China as well as to North Korea. On the other hand, if some years down the road the Western powers manage to militarize and Nazify European nations like Poland and Germany and Romania and Bulgaria and so forth. And now suddenly, it's not just Ukraine anymore, but now there's like maybe 1 million or 2 million troops that are available to invade Russia. Well, maybe at that point, the Russians might need help from North Koreans and Chinese, and they might start fielding regiments and armies from those nations to come fight alongside. So that could, in a world war, that could be a likely scenario. So the fact that they are already preparing the grounds for this makes sense for me, because the West is not going to give up. They are absolutely committed to the project of destroying Russia, and they won't stop. And so, once they lost their fight to the last Ukrainian, they're going to continue, arming up the rest of Europe. And, Russia has to be prepared for those things. And who knows, in 10 years' time, the West might have, again, like Operation Barbarossa in 1941, I think they put together 3.5 million troops. It wasn't just the Germans; it was the Finns, the Hungarians, the Poles, the Czechs, the Slovaks, the Romanians, Bulgarians, Swedes, Spaniards, Italians, Finns. They it wasn't like they taught us in school. This was just Hitler, and he just went crazy, and then things went bad. No, this was exactly the same as we're living today, only. I mean, not exactly, but the moving principle behind all these events is exactly the same one. The versions of the fights and the wars is different, but it's the same obsession. Why? Russia has an estimated $75 trillion in natural resource wealth. That would be very good if our banks could control that.
Mm-hmm. Now, on the Netanyahu, first of all, Jay Blue says Prime Minister Netanyahu. Let me highlight it, which is crazy right here. He says Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to do a rap video with Drake to work on his image with the youth. Unfortunately for him, Drake declined because I guess the rapper Drake is half Jewish. But I put that up there because I want your opinion on where is this thing going with Netanyahu and his government and Hamas.
Well, the thing about Drake is, first time I hear about it, and I can hardly believe it. I mean, it's, if that's true, then they are really truly desperate. But they are really truly desperate, and I think that Israel is very soon soon. It could take a few years. It's going to be an ex-nation. I think that they've taken up a war, a fight that they've lost on all fronts. They thought they were going to go into Gaza and just destroy Hamas. And that didn't happen. And not only did it not happen, but Hamas is now in a stronger position than it was in October. The people of Gaza support Hamas. Hamas is inflicting more and more damage on Israeli troops. And now they're sustaining literally daily missile and rocket attacks from Lebanon, from Hezbollah. And now apparently the top brass of the military yesterday approved the plan to go to war against Hezbollah in Lebanon. So open a northern front. A few years ago, I think a group of about 100 or so, I forget the exact numbers, don't hold me to the word, but they wrote like an extensive document in which they tried to explain to the Israeli cabinet that going to war against Hezbollah would be absolutely a suicide for IDF, for Israeli Defense Forces. They know they are going to lose that war, which is why they never opened that front in spite of all this months and months of tough talk and chest thumping, and we're going to go and we're going to definitely kill them all and we're going to definitely defeat. You know, like they are trash talking. They're being very tough, but they never went. And so now, you know, the pressure is growing. The military top brass approved the plans to go and open that front. I'm still not convinced that they're going to do it. But, you know, what's happening now is that, you know, parts of Israel are starting to get emptied out. People have to, you know, people can't live under rocket attacks. And Hezbollah can reach anywhere in Israel. And so they have to evacuate to where they feel safer. And so Israel is getting slowly depopulated of Israelis. You know, they're now refugees in central Israel, around Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, I don't know where. But, you know, some of them, the ones that have, you know, double nationalities and 2 passports, they might think like, well, you know, forget this, I'm getting out of here. The economy is in the doldrums. Their military is losing. They lost all the allies in the region. I mean, you know, even Jordan is not really helping out much. The United States seems powerless to help Israel, to do anything about Hamas, about Hezbollah, about Houthis, and all of these militias and armies have clearly been preparing for this for a very long time, and they've developed strategies that, you know, Western powers do not have an answer to. And so, you know, what's Israel going to do? I don't think they have a card to play yet. Rather than saying like, okay, things are looking really bad, let's cut our losses, let's make nice with our neighbors, let's talk 2-state solution or whatever, 1-state solution, and let's try to save this country. Instead, they're doubling down, they're tripling down, they're quintupling down. They still want to kill all the Arabs. They still want to depopulate. They still are talking about Eretz Israel. That's going to be, you know, some kind. You know, they're being led by delusional fanatics who, you know, see this as in eschatological terms. This is the end times, and there's no price that they're not willing to pay in other people's blood for playing out their vision. And so their vision is going to lead to the end of Israel. And that's not just Alex Krainer talking. Let's remember that in 2012, Henry Kissinger, who knew something about this region, said that 10 years from now, there's not going to be an Israel. That Israel is going to cease to exist. So, you know, the time frame, he missed the time frame, but there's a reason why he said that. And I think that we're seeing the end game now.
Alex, man, thank you a million for joining me. I mean, everybody is delighted that you were on the show, and hopefully we can promote this show, man, and get more viewers because you know what they do to my show. But anyway, thank you again for joining me, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Great pleasure, Rashid. Thank you for having me, and greetings to all your viewers and listeners. And never forget, global warming is real. Vaccines are safe and effective. Russia bad, China bad. What else? And YouTube, give Rashid back his subscribers.
Thank you, Alex, man. I'll talk to you later, and I'll send you a copy of the video, man.
Thank you. Take care. Bye. Bye.
Everybody, see, we finally got Alex on. I mean, Alex he's a treasure trove of information. And we're gonna have Dimitri on the show. We're gonna have Larry back on the show. We're gonna have a whole host of people on the show. We're overcoming all of these obstacles that are put out by StreamYard and YouTube or whatever. For those of you who got knocked off over on Rumble, we're going to try to have the show up in a matter of an hour or so. Okay, my son is working on the links and everything. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me on the most powerful platform for truth, bar none, anywhere on God, green, and earth. Thank you all for joining me. From the bottom of my heart to the depth of my soul, I love you if you love truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that the true and living God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. And once again, hey, Kabari, I beat you to this again. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. I'm out of here. Thank you all. Hit the like, subscribe, and share. We're out of here. Peace.